broadcasting from the Unshackled studios in Melbourne. This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net. Now here's Tim Wilms.
Hello everybody and welcome to this week's WilmsFront Snapshot news program, coming to you on this Monday, the 10th of November 2025, Remembrance Day Eve. It is 8:30 p.m. here in Melbourne, Victoria. We are live on the WilmsFront YouTube channel, the WilmsFront Rumble channel, and on my WilmsFront X account. Now, I thought I'd start the show with, well, what else to call it than the death report. We've had over the weekend the death of former Labor Senator, Minister and Power Broker Graham Richardson, who until recently was prominently on Sky News Australia. He used to have his own program called Rich Show. He was of the New South Wales Labor right. He was called the so-called numbers man, helped Bob Hawke to become Prime Minister, and then switched to help Paul Keating become Prime Minister. He wrote all about his factional activities and also his scandals in his autobiography, Whatever It Takes. I've got a copy of it somewhere. He was only 76. He had bowel cancer, so had his bowel removed. So he was in a wheelchair, and so obviously had gone through many health issues. And now he's going to be given a state funeral, which I think's a bit much because we're giving state funerals to basically everyone in public life who passes, and probably the same with John Laws. I never listened to him, but he was famous back in the day. Although he only retired last year, his second retirement. He retired from 2SM. He was originally on 2UE and 2GB, was known as the Golden Tonsils, had a rivalry with Alan Jones. Alan Jones has decided to write obituaries on his Facebook page. First time he's posted there in a couple of years. Although they were rivals, Lawsy and Jonesy, he wrote quite a measured obituary. And obviously on Sky News, he hosted a show with Graham Richardson, Richo, and Jones. Obviously, Richo was part of the old political machine, as was John Laws, the original influencer, as has been called, Talkback Radio. And going overseas, easily the best death was the death of former Vice President of the United States and war criminal Dick Cheney at the age of 84. I think his pacemaker finally gave up. I don't think Donald Trump will be going to his funeral. Obviously, one of the worst vice presidents in US history, the architect of the US-led invasion of Iraq. And, well, we've had some deaths of some big US war criminals recently. Donald Rumsfeld, George W. Bush's Secretary of Defense. They both originally worked in the Ford White House. And a couple of years back, there was also the death of of Secretary of State under Bill Clinton, Madeleine Albright, who said that the death of 500,000 Iraqi children was worth it. So for those who believe in hell, I don't because I'm an atheist, hell is going to get a lot more fiery with Dick Cheney arriving. All right, let's get on with the rest of the news.
This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net.
Now, where do you start with the latest crime in Melbourne and Victoria? I mean, the whole show would just be listing the various violent crimes that have occurred over Melbourne this past week. So we had another stabbing in the CBD last Thursday morning at 6 a.m. A man was trying to make a citizen's arrest of a 32-year-old Dallas man armed with a knife acting erratically running through a car park. Now, Dallas is near Broadmeadows, so obviously a very Middle Eastern area. There was a security guard who was assaulted at Westfield Knox, which is in the east. I thought that was a good area. There was a arson attack at a site in Dandenong. There was a carjacking in Elwood. Now, last week, 7 News aired a series of special reports called Breaking Point about Victoria's youth crime crisis. Now, Jacinta Allan, she's repeatedly said, our Premier, that Melbourne is safe and tried to deflect that, look at all the crowds at the Melbourne Cup, at the T20, at the MCG between Australia and India, the Oasis concerts. Look, the city is bustling. But when she sat down with 7 News' Mike Amor, she said she was sorry to the victims of Melbourne's crime wave.
I don't know whether it would make a difference, but do you think that your government owes Victorians an apology for becoming this bad?
I'm deeply sorry for every family who has been touched by a crime, by these violent, brazen crimes.
Would you have a message to Victorians? Are you going to stop this? Are you going to get this crime under control?
I absolutely accept that too many Victorians are deeply concerned about this level of violent, brazen behaviour, and it is unacceptable. We need new ways to respond to this, and those new ways include tougher consequences.
So does that mean Jacinta Allan is going to introduce tougher penalties for both adult and youth violent offenders? Mike Amor also spoke to the Police Commissioner, Mike Bush, who says that according to Victoria Police Intelligence, there are 33 violent youth gangs with 610 members, and 500 of them are out in the community. Though Mike Bush, after he had to apologise for using a Victoria Police chopper to travel to the Australian-New Zealand Police Commissioners Summit in Hobart last month, it's been revealed he took 2 other chopper rides. First one was back on June 28 with his wife Vicky and 2 New Zealand police officers over Melbourne for 10 minutes. Then another on July 29. Him and his executive assistant got a lift from Avalon Airport in Geelong to Police HQ in West Melbourne. He said it was to gain a very real understanding of how the air wing operates in the air, which simply cannot be achieved from ground level. It seems that he is wanting to show off to his police mates in New Zealand that look at me, I'm the police commissioner of a big Australian state now. Although there's one of those old police mates he certainly won't be associating with is former New Zealand Deputy Commissioner Jevon McSkimming, who has been convicted of possessing child abuse material. Now, Victoria Police, they are also investigating the campaign against racism and fascism, which is a socialist alternative front group. It's planning meeting for countering the March for Australia on October 19th, when Victoria Police were pelted with rocks. This was one of the slides from an international speaker from the UK. So it says, be militant in your ideology, but flexible in your tactics. And it says, inside your 2 bricks, throw me at a cop, use me to build community. So the University of Melbourne is also launching its own internal investigation. Will Victoria Police, will they back up the tough words of their commander, Wayne Cheeseman, and actually finally crack down on these violent socialist Antifa protesters, or will they be out on the streets being violent again at there's a next rally is the Save Australia in Melbourne on November 15th, the Saturday, and then there's the Put Australia First on Sunday, November 30. Now, we also had confirmed today that we can expect more of this with the Aboriginal Treaty legislation passed, a land claim by members of the Wurundjeri tribe, a land claim for most of metropolitan Melbourne. Now, this is despite the fact that sovereignty was ceded to the Crown when John Batman, the founder of Melbourne, negotiated with the local Aboriginal tribe to obtain the city of Melbourne for the British colony. So sovereignty, there already was a treaty agreement, but of course they claim that now that John Batman took advantage of these Aboriginals, and he did bad things in Tasmania with killing Aboriginal people, so it's retrospective, null and void. Now, I've previously said that this treaty is not about a retrospective ceding of sovereignty. It's about co-governance, Makarrata, and this is just going to get even more of this will happen. There'll be more racially segregated services, and also more places where non-Aboriginal Victorians aren't allowed to go.
This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net.
All right, let's go over to, it seems that the New South Wales government, the Premier, the media have gone absolutely insane over the National Socialist Network. I think they were demonstrating under their political party, White Australia. So they held up a sign which said, abolish the Jewish lobby. They were there for about 10 minutes. Joel Davis and Jack Eltis made a speech, and then it was filmed, and then they moved on. Now, it's, to my view, the Premier, the government, the New South Wales Police reaction, the media, they are exactly playing into NSN and White Australia's propaganda with this reaction. And now a lot of the hyperventilating centres on that the NSN White Australia had a permit to protest outside the New South Wales Parliament. by New South Wales Police, but the new Police Commissioner, Mel Langdon's, I think it's Layan, said that he knew nothing about it. I saw him interviewed by Sherry Markson just before I went on air, and of course, Sherry was her usual triggered and shrill, hysterical self. It was interesting that Mel Lanyon said that if it was done all again, he'd still grant the permit, because the permits are about they grant the permit if the protest is not a threat to public safety. That's why they fought the march over the Harbour Bridge by the pro-Palestine protesters and wanting to protest about outside the Opera House on the anniversary of the first Opera House protest 2 years ago. Now, this just shows me just how much of a bad idea a protest permit system is, because we have David Southwick, the shadow police minister here in Victoria, wanting to introduce permits for protests here. And now, as we've seen with the reaction to this, that there are demands for ideologically policing of protest permits. And in my view, as long as you're not obstructing traffic, which not even the NSN White Australia were doing, why should you have to get permission from the police, and which is part of the government, to protest? Because, well, we saw the logical extension of protest permits during the COVID lockdowns, where all protests were banned. It's a very slippery slope. And like, I'm not sure, I'm not from New South Wales, but is it so onerous that you need to have a permit with police if you want to walk down the front of the New South Wales Parliament with a sandwich board with a slogan on it? I mean, how... Like, this is the whole, you have to get permission from the people you want to protest against. Now, they're so to abolish the Jewish lobby that it was part of their protest against the new New South Wales hate speech laws. And the Premier Chris Minns he's again feeding into the NSN White Australia's propaganda by proposing more laws against National Socialism, and White Australia now wants to ban Nazi slogans. So he wants to see if he can do that. So banning blood and honor, which they chanted. Does he also want to ban Hail Hitler as well? Now we're getting into the really speech restricting by actually banning slogans. Are they even going to ban Australia for the white man as well, which is not a National Socialist Hitler youth slogan? And Chris Minns was even asked today whether he would be in favour of banning the White Australia Party from registering. He didn't give a direct answer because he knows that laws can't be passed to do that.
What will you do to prevent White Australia or the NSN from registering as a political party ahead of the next state election?
Yeah, look, I'm going to take that on notice. That's not specifically up to me. Obviously, the Electoral Commissioner has a role in relation to the registration of political parties, and we have to work out whether it breaches hate speech laws and laws designed to stop political or racial divisions and hatred in our community. But I want to take that on notice.
Personal view, though?
Well, my personal view is, obviously I'm a politician associated with a political party on the centre left, and that's my personal view and my political view. I would never want to be associated with these terrible people. I mean, I'll just give you an example. As abhorrent as it is to have a racial rally on the streets of Sydney, listen to what they said. In their speeches on Saturday, they said it was the Anzac legacy to stand up for their form of fascism and hatred. The truth of the matter is Anzacs fought the Nazis. They weren't in league with them. They are the people that were the focus of the bravery and, in many cases, the deaths associated with Australian servicemen and women who put their lives on the line to protect democracy and fight fascism. And we just can't let this ahistorical, this anti-history be spread in our public forums or in civic life in New South Wales. From the government's perspective, it's important to note, firstly, that literally hundreds of those protests have been both authorised and managed with New South Wales Police going back 2 years. It's not as if they've been ruled out. What we're talking about with the Nazis is saying, no, you can't even have a protest in Sydney, that we're going to develop laws to target you and ensure that you can't spew that racial hatred on the streets of Sydney. I mean, you would understand for that. Well, hang on, I'm going to finish. Don't you think I should be able to finish, surely? In those circumstances, I don't think it's reasonable to suggest that that police have in some ways stopped or attempting to stop or introducing legislation to stop, for example, Palestinian activists. They're not. And to suggest that we are is counterfactual. That's not our view. That's not the point we're trying to make today, and that's not our intentions when it comes to legislation.
Now, the pro-Palestine protesters, they are very salty that, how come the Nazis got to rally, yet New South Wales police always try to block our protests. Well, I just mentioned that because New South Wales police believe that them choosing sites like the Opera House and the Harbour Bridge are going to be a threat to public safety, that people get injured. Now, there's been as part of the fallout is that Joel Davis posted on his Telegram channel that he instructed his followers to go and on her X account rhetorically rape the Teal member for Wentworth, the federal electorate Allegra spender. Now, this was interpreted as a rape threat. Now, Joel Davis told 9 News Sydney Tonight that it was a silly joke and I get death threats all the time. And what about all of the actual rapists that Allegra Spender, through her support for mass immigration, has brought in? Again, 9 News condemning the neo-Nazi rally, yet interviewing one of the speakers. This is the whole thing, that the media just can't help themselves. You know, what the actual reaction should have been is to just ignore them at all, because then they wouldn't have had any reaction to post on their social media to say, look how they're wanting to even crack down on us further. They're scared of us. That's how it's always spun in the NSN White Australia propaganda. Look how scared they are of us because we're protesting. That's how they always spin it in their propaganda. And they've also, the mainstream media also alleged that there's been rape and death threats against the state member for Vaucluse, Kelly Sloan, who's a former Channel 9 journalist. It seems to be the Nine media which has the most extensive coverage through 9 News Sydney and also the Sydney Morning Herald. Now, it was quite interesting that last week the ASIO Director General Mike Burgess made a speech at the Lowy Institute, which was founded by Frank Lowy, the founder of Westfield Shopping Towns, which he sold those to the Sentinel Group and then retired to Israel. He fought in the Israeli War of Independence. Mike Burgess told the Lowy Institute that that the NSN White Australia view journalists as useful idiots.
Extremist organisations, whether religiously or ideologically motivated, are adaptive and patient. They are skilled at exploiting gaps and fissures in social cohesion, harnessing and harvesting grievances. The way nationalist and racist violent extremists attempted to leverage the so-called March for Australia rallies is a case in point. The biggest neo-Nazi group, the National Socialist Network, or White Australia as it is rebranding itself, identified the demonstrations as a vehicle to raise its profile. It strategically and opportunistically exploited the organisers' complaints about immigration and the cost of living. This is a key part of the network's broader strategy to mainstream and expand its movement by focusing on issues with broader appeal. Modern neo-Nazis crave attention and publicity. It gives them credibility and helps with recruitment. They see journalists as useful idiots in this regard, and they celebrate even the most critical coverage because it inevitably leads to a surge in membership applications. After one recent story, members joked about thanking the media for the free promotion. At the same time, though, its ideology and its provocative, offensive and high-profile actions are antithetical to social cohesion. At its core, the National Socialist Network is anti-immigrant, anti-Indigenous, anti-gay, anti-Jew, anti-Islam and anti-anything that does not fit with its white Anglo-centric worldview. Its version of social cohesion is monochrome and monocultural. And even if the organisation does not engage in terrorism, I remain deeply concerned by its hateful, divisive rhetoric and increasingly violent propaganda, and the growing likelihood that these things will prompt spontaneous violence, particularly in response to perceived provocation.
Now, I've noticed a lot of the media, particularly the Sky After Dark, running with Mike Burgess' comparison of the NSN White Australia with the Islamist Hezbollah Tahrir, which is having a conference this week in Bankstown. Now, going to obviously last week, one of the Australian Federal Police Deputy Commissioners talked about his concern about the White Australia Party wanting to register. The only way to ban a White Australia National Socialist or Fascist political party from registering is to have a referendum like Sir Robert Menzies did in the 1950s to ban the Communist Party, which failed. So the only way to remove the implied freedom of political communication in the Constitution is a new amendment to change it. I wonder if our political leaders would go that far to actually have a referendum to ban any national, well, they'd probably go even further, banning any National Socialist or White Australia organisation from forming outright. Now, down here in Victoria, Damien Richardson was found guilty of performing a Nazi salute at one of the National Workers' Alliance events last year. He raised up his arm. I'm just not going to reenact it here. Will I be prosecuted if I do this? Well, he was, and he's been found guilty. We'll see if he's sentenced to jail like Jacob Herzant was, though Jacob is appealing. And now, obviously, members of the National Socialist Network White Australia were very prominent at the front of the original March for Australia on August 31, particularly in Sydney and Melbourne. But there has been a split with March for Australia in Queensland. Its organiser, Shallow Cal, is splitting to form Australia Marches because he doesn't want any association with the National Socialist Network. In fact, he says that he prevented Jacob Herzant from speaking in Brisbane He was there, but didn't speak. Now, he was also criticised by March for Australia organisers Beck Freedom and Jesse Stewart for allowing Jared Rennick to speak after it had been announced that he wasn't allowed to speak for getting into arguments with some of the NSN aligned accounts on X. And now the Save Australia rally in Melbourne at midday on November 15th, that's organised by Harrison McLean of the Melbourne Freedom Rally and the Put Australia First. So the Sydney one is on Saturday, November 29th. Jacinta Price and her husband, Colin Lilly, were going to be speaking and performing respectively, but they've both pulled out, citing other commitments. There have been no announcement of speakers for Melbourne, which is going to be on the Sunday. I thought the point was the rallies were supposed to be on the same day. Monica Schmidt, who's the main promoter of this, says it's because of the permit system that they had to change it to a Saturday to march near the Town Hall of Sydney. Though she did get a free platform on Sky News Outsiders on Sunday to spruik it. Morgan C. Jonas and Nick Patterson are the organisers of the Melbourne one, which is on the Sunday. I know that this is very confusing because the idea is to have the rallies on the same day. Otherwise, people get confused whether it's on the Saturday or the Sunday.
This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net.
Now, the Liberal Party Net Zero soap opera continues. So they're going to be meeting on Wednesday. They're going to, even though it's not a sitting week, they're going to fly in specifically to debate whether they're going to dump net zero by 2050 entirely, or in fact, dump the language of net zero. A moderate Liberal Senator Andrew Bragg, he gave this really bizarre interview on ABC Insiders yesterday where he said that he didn't want there to be a fatwa on net zero. Now, the National Party have already dumped net zero mandate by 2050, but they do support emissions reductions. So this is being seen, this party room meeting, as well a test of whether Susan Ley survives until Christmas as leader or until next year. Backbencher Sarah Henderson, a former shadow minister, said on Friday that she cannot support the things the way they are in the Liberal Party. And last Monday night, Angus Taylor, who ran against Susan Ley for the leadership, and Andrew Hastie, of course, quit the Shadow Home Affairs Ministry so he could go to the backbench and so he could speak openly about net zero and reducing mass migration. They had a dinner together in a Thai restaurant in Canberra, which, of course, was seen as some sort of leadership meeting. But, you know, what's the crime? Eating a meal, a succulent Thai meal. Now, Anthony Albanese is, because of all of this internal, the never-ending policy and net zero debate, is basically getting a free ride. But it was interesting after the news poll last week, which had Labor at 36, Coalition at 24 and One Nation at 15. The Resolve poll in the aftermath of the inflation figures, 3.2% for the year ending September, 23.9% rise in electricity prices. The Resolve poll was much narrower. So it was 33% for Labor, 29% for the Coalition, and 12% for One Nation. So, and there was also a poll that Australians were going to be spending less this Christmas on presents, on holidays, and it should also be mentioned that a majority of Australians also think that immigration is too high and want it reduced. And Anthony Albanese, he of course he says that he's not going to succumb to hubris, but he is trying to pass legislation to charge for freedom of information requests. So freedom of information, it ain't going to be free no more. And now, despite the economic situation not improving in Australia, productivity not improving, we are still getting a whole bunch of New Zealanders coming over here. So the Guardian did a profile on this bookshop worker who said that he was spending half his wages on the weekly food shop in New Zealand and putting groceries on Afterpay, but in Australia he's spending about a quarter of that amount. So we're still wealthy enough in Australia that New Zealanders want to come over for a better life, and they can due to Trans-Tasman free travel visa arrangements. Pauline Hanson, she was over at Mar-a-Lago and speaking at the US CPAC. But Anthony Albanese, over in the United States, he can always rely on his celebrity friends to say what a great bloke he is. And Russell Crowe did that when it was interesting. Joe Rogan asked him, it was sort of a loaded question, what the hell's going wrong in Australia? And then he launched into this great defense of Albo's character.
What is wrong with the way Australia's run?
Well, we're a little bit lucky at the moment. We have a Prime Minister who's very much motivated by trying to help everybody, which should be the job of a politician, right?
Sure.
To improve the lives of the people that they represent. And he's kind of inherited, a conga line of stupidity that was going on, and he's trying to fix things. But of course, just the way things are reported, whatever, there's just haters on every corner. But he's a good man, and he's doing his very best, and he's, working extremely hard. But, he arrives off a plane the other day. He's just come back home from some very successful international meetings where he's established various trade things and opportunities and situations for Australia. Gets off the plane wearing a Joy Division T-shirt, right? Big band from his youth, and he's just a relaxed character, He's been wearing a suit and tie for weeks on the road. He's just walking off Australia's version of Air Force One in a Joy Division T-shirt. So the member of the opposition wanted to point out, and did so in Parliament, that Joy Division is a Nazi term and comes from a section of a particular camp where the women were prostituted, and that's why it was called the Joy Division. And it's like, okay, what's the point of that, right? We all know it's a band name. Okay? We know it's a band name, right? And just because you like the Rolling Stones doesn't mean that you want rocks to be falling on people. What are you fucking talking about? This whole stupidity. And that's what you're facing all the time. Picking up some pointless piece of minutiae and, lighting it on fire and making a smoke screen to cover up the reality of the fact that that Prime Minister just worked his ass off on behalf of the country and successfully achieved a bunch of things and should be patted on the back, not pushed down the stairs.
Now, Russell Crowe was on the Rogan podcast, ironically enough, to promote his latest film, Nuremberg, where he plays Nazi Hermann Goring. And it's the second Nazi that Russell Crowe has played in his career. Obviously, he played the neo-Nazi Hando in the Australian film Romper Stomper back in 1992. Now, he and Albo go way back from when Russell Crowe took over the South Sydney Rabbitohs, and he did the voiceover for Anthony Albanese's campaign launch in 2022. Now, it's also worth mentioning that the New South Wales Labor government gave his proposed film studio on the New South Wales Mid-North Coast 5.5 million of taxpayers' money. It's still years away from breaking ground and actually being built, but it's still got a cool $5.5 million grant from the New South Wales government. So for Russell Crowe, it still pays to have friends in the Australian government. And Anthony Albanese has obviously got his friends in the media to give him favourable coverage. Remember the News Corp front Sunday pages a couple of weeks ago back in Australia. And it mentioned that the Prime Minister's on board. And I checked the author, and of course it was Anthony Albanese's best friend at News Corp, Joe Hildebrand, who authored this glowing prime ministerial endorsement. Joe Hildebrand is always the main elbow cheerleader whenever he appears on a Sky News panel.
This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net.
Now, the US off-year election results are in, and as was expected, Zohran Mamdani was elected mayor of New York City, and there he is with Alex Soros, the son of George Soros. I mean, Alex Soros, he very much is a more in-your-face Soros. Unlike his father, he's not a shadowy figure. He likes to get up. Yeah, these are the people. These are the far-left politicians that I'm endorsing, and now he's engaged to Hillary Clinton's former confidant, Uma Aberdeen, whose ex-husband was, of course, Anthony Weiner, who, after he resigned from Congress, tried to run for mayor of New York, but then there were more pictures of his wiener that he'd sent to women, including underage girls, which he went to jail for. So Zohran Mamdani, obviously there has been a lot of, particularly memes, now that New York has a Muslim mayor. Will the Statue of Liberty wear a burqa now? But I'm on the side of people who is communist policies, free buses, state-run grocery stores, and rent control are much more alarming. I mean, Zohran Mamdani's wife doesn't wear a hijab, and now he's actually Indian. So he was born in Uganda to Indian parents. Uganda had a large Indian diaspora until a lot of them were expelled by Inan Adi. I think that's how you pronounce the dictator's name. It's interesting that although he was born in Uganda, it didn't make him African. He's still an Indian. Now, in the other off-year elections, Abigail Spanberger, the Democrat, was elected governor of Virginia. And now Virginia is normally a blue state. Glenn Youngkin won it for the Republicans in 2021, basically because of critical race theory, and the Democrats were obsessed with masking kids in schools. Also elected Attorney General Democrat Jay Jones despite the fact that it was exposed that he had fantasized in a text message about assassinating the Republican Speaker of the House of Delegates, Todd Gilbert, and his family. He said, if those guys died before me, I want to go to their funerals and piss on their graves, send them out awash in something. 3 people, 2 bullets. Gilbert, Hitler, and Pol Pot. Gilbert gets 2 bullets to the head. Spoiler, put Gilbert in the crew with the worst 2 people you know, and he receives both bullets every time. What a charming first officer of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Now, of course, much was made that a woman was elected governor of Virginia, and also first female governor of New Jersey, Mikey Sherrill. In the Minneapolis Democrat versus Democrat, Mayor Jacob Free was won against Democratic Socialist Somalian Omar Fatah. So it wasn't a clean sweep for the New Americans, though Zoran Mamdani made sure to thank in his election night speech every ethnic group apart from white Americans for his election victory.
Thank you to those so often forgotten by the politics of our city who made this movement their own. I speak of Yemeni bodega owners and Mexican abuelas, Senegalese taxi drivers and Uzbek nurses, Trinidadian line cooks and Ethiopian aunties. Yes, aunties. To every New Yorker in Kensington and Midwood and Hunts Point.
Now, the US government shutdown could be ending very shortly, as some Democrats, Senate Democrats, they are agreeing to a compromise by the House and Senate Republicans to basically extend spending measures on healthcare and food stamps that'd be satisfactory for them. So basically it'd be another continuance motion, which so it's basically in a way, Trump, it's another one of Trump's tacos. Trump always chickens out. He's already granted a previous continuance motion, which is basically Biden's spending. Now, Trump, despite him talking tough against Mamdani in the lead up, is now much more conciliatory, saying he should pick up the phone to me and we can have a chat. So, it's quite a change from Trump. Obviously, the radical left, the radical Democrats, he's now much more conciliatory after the off-year election. So, well, I was about to say it'd be good if the shutdown ended, but I saw my good friend Kyle Katazi, who's been a guest on WilmsFront, say it's actually good that the government shut down because they're not wasting money on lots of what are deemed non-essential public servants and public services. So yes, it all depends on your point of view about what is the essential function of government.
This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net.
Let's go to the BBC scandal. Which BBC scandal? No, it's not that they've discovered another pedophile at the BBC. It's that the BBC bias has just it's gone to astronomical fake news levels. So I've entitled this segment Bastardized Britain Corrupt for BBC. Now, despite the BBC having its own fact-checking department, BBC Verify, clearly it's not meant to fact-check themselves because they splice together in a panorama episode, which is like their four corners just before the 2024 election, they splice together Trump's remarks to the Stop the Steal protesters before they marched to the Capitol to make it appear that he incited the insurrection. This is the splice and what Trump actually said side by side.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
I mean, this is basically like The Simpsons with Rock Bottom when they did the edit, the sweet can. That's basically what the BBC Panorama have done. And it's a scandal, fake news. The BBC Director General, Tim Davie, there's no S on the end of that, and BBC News CEO Deborah Turness have resigned. And now BBC Panorama has a history of, if not outright fake news, but deceptive journalistic practices. So Martin Bashir, to get his Princess Diana exclusive in 1995, where she said that she didn't think that Charles was fit to be king, he forged bank statements that said she was being that the royal family had paid people to follow her, so seriously misled her. And also, the BBC, they have also been exposed for its enforcement of woke DEI ideology. It reprimanded one of its news presenters for correcting a script about that said pregnant people, and she corrected it to pregnant women.
London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine has released research which says that nearly 600 heat-related deaths are expected in the UK. Malcolm Mystery, who is involved in the research, says that the aged, pregnant people, women, and those with pre-existing health conditions need to take precautions.
The presenter, Martine Croxall, she was reprimanded. It was the BBC said that this showed that she was giving a editorial comment that breached the BBC's impartiality, even though the script was not impartial because it used the transgender ideology term pregnant people. And now there's loads of people on X saying that Martine Croxall, she doesn't need to work at the BBC. If they're going to treat her like that, she should get a job elsewhere. And I just love how she clearly had enough, and she saw the script, pregnant people, and she just rolled her eyes and said pregnant women. I just love that she just had enough and she just corrected it there. I mean, BBC should have reprimanded whoever wrote the script there. And it was interesting that even John Sopel of the fake news agents both condemned the BBC's doctoring of Trump's remarks and its treatment of Martine Croxall. That even somebody like John Sopel, a far-left Trump hater, even knows when the BBC has been egregious. Now, it is Remembrance Day tomorrow, or what's known as Armistice Day in Britain. It's really huge there in Britain, and they have on Sunday that's known as Remembrance Sunday. Every news presenter and politician has the poppy on. Now, Good Morning Britain, they interviewed a 100-year-old World War II veteran, and he's a centurion now. He decided to be honest and said that the sacrifice was not worth it.
What does Remembrance Sunday mean for you? What is your message?
My message is, I can see in my mind's eye those rows and rows of white stones of all the hundreds of my friends and everybody else that gave their lives for what? The country of today. No, I'm sorry. The sacrifice wasn't worth the result that it is now.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
What do you mean by that, though? At this point?
What we fought for, and what we fought for was our freedom. We find that even now it's darn sight worse than what it was when I fought for it.
Oh, Alec, I'm sorry you feel like that, because I want you to know that all the generations that have come since, including me and my children, are so grateful for your bravery and all that for service personnel. And it's our job now, isn't it, to make it the country that you fought for. You absolutely fought for.
That is it.
And we will do. We want to...
I'm so wonderful to know there are people like you that can spread the word around.
We will do.
Younger generation.
And I guarantee that everybody watching at home will be wanting you to send lots of love. We've got another little bit special thing for you, Alec. We've got the D-Day darlings here. Come on over, guys. You've got a little special present for him. Ooh. Come and give it if you can, to thank you for all your many brave years of service and others like you.
This is our album, Alec, and I know you love a lot of the songs on there. And this is the least we can do. This is such a small thing, but, you know, we love you so much, Alec.
And it's all signed for you there as
These
well.
young ladies are like my own daughters.
Look at the patronising there by the presenter there, Kate Garraway. And he's exactly right, that the freedom that the World War II veterans fought for is completely evaporated. Last week, ex-footballer Joey Barton was found guilty over grossly offensive ex-posts directed at Jeremy Vine and female football pundits Lucy Ward and Enai Aluko. So he was found guilty of 6 counts. Now, Jeremy Vine, of course, who sent Alex Belfield to prison for 5 years for allegedly stalking, though he did serve 2.5 and is out now. Jeremy Vine called Alex Belfield the Jimmy Savile of trolling, which is not even a comparison. So Jeremy Vine told the court that Joey Barton calling him a bike nonce in response to alleging that he had a brain injury left him completely devastated and left him having sleepless nights and feeling scared and upset. Oh, poor Jeremy Vine. What about all of the motorists that he's terrified over the years with his cycling videos, getting into arguments with them? And now Joey Barton already paid Jeremy Vine £110,000 in a defamation settlement. Now he's going to be sentenced, maybe to prison for this. Now, Joey Barton has been to prison before for actual physical assault, now he could go to jail for just hurting people's feelings. So he was felt guilty of 6 counts of grossly offensive ex post. So the posts that he has been found guilty of. Now, this was by a jury. Hang on, I've lost my place here. So it was over a post where he said, all off the back of Black Lives Matter, George Floyd nonsense. This is why he said about, Aluko was only there to tick the boxes, but he was cleared of writing that Warden Aluko were the Fred and Rosemary Wests of football commentary. And he was also convicted over a post suggesting Jeremy Vine had visited Epstein Island. And if you see this fella by a primary school, call 999. And the judge chastised Joey Barton for wearing a patriotic scarf in court. Would he have been chastised if he'd worn a Palestinian scarf in the court, the kayfa? And so, yeah, there's no free speech in Britain anymore. And there's also no justice because, would you believe it, yet again, the British prisons have accidentally released a foreign sex offender, this time Algerian sex offender Brahim Kador Chef from Wandsworth Prison. Now, he's been recaptured. But how come it's only foreign rapists and sex offenders who are accidentally released? How come it's not a white British thought criminal who's published hurty words who's accidentally released? How comes the Reverend James Costello's not accidentally released early? It seems to be only these foreign sex offenders. You'd be forgiven. This is why a lot of people are conspiracy theorists who believe that this is deliberate, because it only seems to work one way.
This is WilmsFront, brought to you by the Unshackled.net.
Now, is as I said, a Remembrance Day tomorrow, November the 11th. It's also a birthday. You know who you are. Happy birthday for tomorrow. Now, Remembrance Day in Australia is remembered for a different reason, and that is November the 11th, 1975, 50 years ago tomorrow, the Governor-General, Sir John Kerr, sacked the elected Prime Minister, Gough Whitlam. This is because there was a divided parliament with the coalition controlling the Senate and blocking the supply bills. And if they weren't passed by November 30, the Australian government would have run out of money and public servants and pensioners wouldn't have been paid. Now, what Sir John Kerr did, it wasn't the sacking itself that was the controversial part, but the fact that he colluded with the opposition leader Malcolm Fraser and said, if I appoint you caretaker prime minister, you'll pass the supply bills and then we'll go to an election. Because Malcolm Fraser, he was blocking the supply bills to trigger an early election. He believed that there were too many scandals and incompetence in the Whitlam government and that there needed to be an election. And it was very coordinated. Malcolm Fraser was hidden away at Government House in Yarralumla. Then Kerr sacked Whitlam. He left, and then he swore in Fraser as Prime Minister, and he went off to Parliament House and told his MPs to pass the supply bills. And Whitlam, for some reason, didn't tell his own senators, and so they didn't know until it was the supply bills were passed. And then Fraser went back to Government House to call the election before the Speaker arrived to say that he'd lost the confidence of the House, because Whitlam obviously had the numbers in the lower house, and because there were no mobile phones in those days, news spread very slowly. So it was basically sort of it wasn't just the sacking; it was this sort of plot. And so the fact that Sir John Kerr went against convention, acting on the advice of the Prime Minister, that was seen as most controversial in our system, Westminster system, which is all based on convention. And this is why Governor-Generals since then have been much more cautious, only acting on the advice of the Prime Minister, which is why David Hurley acted on the advice of Scott Morrison and swore him into those secret ministries, when some argued that maybe he should have pushed back against the Prime Minister in that time, or suggest maybe we should publicise this. But it just goes to show in our system, it's based on convention, that if the conventions are broken, all sorts of crazy things can happen. We don't have... Obviously, we have a constitution, but it doesn't mention the Prime Minister in it. So the Governor-General is obviously the Queen's representative, so there's heaps of documentaries and remembrance which is coming out. There's a documentary on Sky News tomorrow night, which I'll be watching, which looks very... the trailers to it look very dramatic. It won't happen again because a Governor-General won't do that. But it was quite an extraordinary episode. And it was interesting that Malcolm Fraser, obviously he won the 1975 election, called after November the 11th in a landslide. He became a elected Prime Minister, and he didn't suffer reputational damage, though Sir John Kerr did. But it was interesting later in life when Malcolm Fraser became a far leftist. He and Whitlam became friends before, because they're all dead now, Whitlam, Fraser and Kerr. In the final federal election before he died, Malcolm Fraser, he'd resigned his membership of the Liberal Party, backed the Green Sarah Hanson-Young for the Senate in South Australia. So that's how far he turned to the left from this right-wing warrior in 1975, doing all that was necessary to bring down a left-wing government, to being further even left of the Labor Party. So it's very, very interesting time in our history. Obviously, there's been allegations that the palace was involved, even though the letters absolved the palace from interference. There's allegations that it was a CIA plot because Whitlam wasn't going to renew the lease on Pine Gap. So there's still lots of theories floating around and documents being unearthed. For all you political nerds, it's so fascinating. Now, I'll see you all back on next Monday at 8:30 p.m. Melbourne time. I'm trying to get a WilmsFront featured interview guest lined up. I'll let you know when that is locked in. I'll be recording some fresh reports from Tiger Mount with Richard Wollstonecroft later this week. And thank you everyone for watching. Until then, good night.
Thanks for tuning in to WilmsFront. Visit timwilms.com to view the archive of episodes, and keep visiting the Unshackled.net to view all our shows, and to keep up with the latest real news and analysis.